The station never slept, but it did develop habits. At exactly 17 minutes past every hour, the lights in Research Wing C dim by 2% to compensate for stellar glare from the nearby star. At exactly the same time, Nathan forgot whatever he had been holding. This time it was a data slate. It slipped from his fingers, struck the floor with a hollow metallic complaint, and skidded under the central work table. Nathan stared at the empty space in his hands for a moment, as if surprised by the betrayal. He bent down with a sigh that suggested this was not a rare event. Across the lab, Kyreth pretended not to notice. She sat very still at her console, long fingers moving with quiet precision, the thin fabric that covered the lower half of her face barely shifting as she breathed. The veil was standard Sytharan formal wear in mixed-species environments, or at least that was the official explanation. Nathan had learned, through observation rather than instruction, that Kyreth wore it even when no one asked her to. He retrieved the slate, bumped his head on the table on the way back up, and winced. Station gravity is set to a very personal level today, he muttered. Kyreth's shoulders twitched. This was, for her, a laugh. The research station orbited a modest yellow star that humans had unimaginatively catalogued as HD 44173b, while the Sytharans had given it a name that translated roughly to the light that does not care about you. Nathan preferred the Sytharan version. It felt honest. Their project was equally unromantic in title and wildly ambitious in scope. Cross-species neural response mapping under variable environmental stressors. In simpler terms, they were trying to figure out how humans and Sytharans reacted differently to the same stimuli, and why diplomatic meetings so often went sideways over things like lighting, silence, or the exact tone used when asking for tea. Kyreth was brilliant at it. She processed data faster than the station's auxiliary AI and corrected Nathan's assumptions with polite efficiency. She also avoided eye contact with such consistency that Nathan initially suspected it was a cultural norm. Then he met other Sytharans. They did not do this. They were expressive, dramatic even, their long ears lifting and angling with emotion, their faces open and communicative. Kyreth, by contrast, angled her body away whenever someone entered the room and kept her gaze fixed just slightly to the left of whoever addressed her. Nathan noticed patterns. It was what he did. He also noticed that Kyreth always adjusted the lab lighting to levels that made human technicians complain and plants wilt. When asked, she claimed it improved focus. When pressed, she claimed humans complained too much. Both statements were true. "So," Nathan said, rolling his chair closer to her station, "I ran the comparative stress models again. And unless the universe has decided to change its fundamental rules out of spite, we're still missing something." Kyreth did not look up. "The universe is known for pettiness." "Right, but I was hoping it would express that through solar flares, not our dataset." Another shoulder twitch. Nathan leaned back, balancing his chair on two legs despite the station's warnings about spinal safety. "I think we're misreading micro-expressions. Human responses rely heavily on involuntary facial feedback. If we're mapping neural spikes without correlating expression..." "No," Kyreth said too quickly. Nathan froze mid-tilt and slowly put the chair back down. "No as in incorrect hypothesis, or no as in, please don't finish that sentence?" There was a pause. The hum of the station filled it, distant and constant, like a patient listener. Kyreth's fingers stilled. "We can compensate with biometric data." "We are compensating," Nathan said gently, "and the error margin is still laughing at us." She adjusted the veil with a motion so practiced it barely registered as movement. "Facial analysis is unnecessary." Nathan frowned, not in challenge, but confusion. "It's standard across species. Even the Traskians use it, and they technically have 3 faces." "Traskians enjoy being perceived," Kyreth replied. "Well, sure, they once held a press conference just to announce a press conference." That earned him a real laugh this time, soft but unmistakable. Nathan smiled without thinking. Then he noticed her hands were trembling. He cleared his throat. "We don't have to do it now, or at all. Professionally speaking, I need to see how you react to certain stimuli. Surprise, discomfort, amusement. especially amusement. That one's apparently very important. Her laughter cut off abruptly. Kyreth stared at the console, at the flowing data she could read without effort, and felt the familiar tightening in her chest. The assumption rose unbidden, old and well-worn. He would see, and then he would understand why she hid. Humans and Sytharans differed in many ways, but beauty standards, she had learned, were cruelly universal. Hers had been decided long before she could object. She stood slowly. Nathan followed the movement with his eyes, immediately worried he had pushed too far. "Hey, if this is uncomfortable, I will comply," Kyreth said, voice steady in a way that suggested careful construction rather than calm. "For the project." She reached up. The veil came away in a single smooth motion. For half a second, the lab felt too quiet. Kyreth did not look at him. She stared past his shoulder, ears angled back, bracing for the reaction she knew by heart. Her markings, uneven, asymmetrical, defiant of Sytharan aesthetic symmetry, were fully visible now. "I apologize," she said quickly. "I understand if this is unpleasant." Nathan blinked. Once, twice. "That's—" He stopped, genuinely at a loss. "Wait, why are you apologizing?" Her head snapped toward him before she could stop herself. He was not staring in horror, or pity, or carefully masked politeness. He was frowning, but not at her. "At the idea itself." "Kyreth," he said slowly, as if testing unfamiliar words, "are you under the impression that I find you unattractive?" Her ears twitched in confusion. "Is that not obvious?" "No," Nathan said. And then, because honesty had always gotten him into trouble before, and he saw no reason to stop now, he added, "It's kind of the opposite." The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of something unsteady, something newly forming. Kyreth stared at him, certain she had misinterpreted the translation matrix. Nathan, meanwhile, was wondering how the universe had managed to convince someone this striking to hide herself, and whether HD 44173b was, in fact, laughing at him personally. Kyreth did not put the veil back on immediately. This in itself was remarkable. She stood very still, as if movement might trigger some delayed response from the universe, waiting for the moment when Nathan's expression would shift, when comprehension would catch up to instinct and revulsion would finally arrive. Late, but inevitable. She had learned over years of careful observation that rejection sometimes arrived politely, sometimes suddenly, but never failed to arrive. It did not. Nathan, meanwhile, was experiencing a rare and deeply uncomfortable sensation. The realization that he might have said something profoundly important without understanding why. "I mean," he added, because silence made him nervous, and this silence had teeth. "If we're being technical about it, asymmetry is statistically more engaging. Humans are wired to notice it. Perfect symmetry actually creeps us out a little. There's a whole field of study on it. I once read a paper titled, 'Why Ideal Faces Feel Untrustworthy,' which frankly explains several politicians." Kyreth stared at him. Her ears lifted slightly, then froze halfway, uncertain what emotional category this conversation belonged to. "You are attempting humor," she said. "Poorly, yes, but with commitment." She hesitated, then, slowly, sat back down at her console. The movement was cautious, as if she expected gravity itself to betray her, now that her face was uncovered. Nathan noticed she angled her body the same way she always had, away from him, but the angle was less severe. Degrees mattered, especially to scientists. He pretended not to notice at all. They returned awkwardly to their work, or at least they tried to. Nathan found it impossible to focus on the data when Kyreth's expressions, subtle, restrained, deeply expressive in ways he had never seen before, were now visible. Not because they were distracting in the way he suspected she feared, but because they added an entire layer of information he hadn't realized was missing. When she concentrated, the slight furrow near her left eye deepened unevenly. When she was amused, it appeared first on one side of her mouth, as if humor had to request permission before fully arriving. When she was irritated, which happened precisely 3 times an hour, when the station's environmental system clicked too loudly, her ears angled back with sharp precision. Nathan caught himself staring. He immediately looked away and pretended to be fascinated by a graph he had already memorized. I am aware, Kyreth said quietly without accusation, that you are observing me. He winced. Professional hazard. That is not reassuring. Fair, he said. For what it's worth, you have excellent data face. She blinked. I do not know what that means. It means when people talk about resting concern, you could teach a masterclass. That earned him a sound halfway between a scoff and a laugh. Progress. Still, tension clung to the room like static charge. Kyreth's mind raced, cataloging every glance, every breath, waiting for the inevitable recalibration, when Nathan's curiosity would turn clinical, then distant, then uncomfortable. She had lived this arc before. Instead, he asked her what she wanted for lunch. This was deeply suspicious. I do not require nourishment at this interval, she said. That's not what I asked, Nathan replied. I asked what you want. There's a difference. She frowned at the concept. Sytharan meals were scheduled, efficient, and rarely discussed. Preference was considered inefficient. I am undecided. Excellent, Nathan said. That means it's my turn to make a bad decision on your behalf. Station cafeteria or nutrient synthesizer roulette. Roulette implies risk. Oh, there is. Last time I got something labeled protein adjacent. Against her will, Kyreth smiled. Fully. The expression surprised her so much she stilled, as if caught committing a minor crime. Nathan noticed. He did not comment. They ate together in the lab, a violation of 3-station policies and at least one unspoken diplomatic guideline. Nathan talked about Earth, about cities that never slept, about foods that had no nutritional justification but were beloved anyway. Kyreth listened, occasionally asking questions that revealed just how alien human chaos was to her. You intentionally consume substances that alter cognition, she said slowly, staring at his mug, for pleasure. Caffeine is a cornerstone of our civilization, Nathan said solemnly. Remove it and society collapses within hours. She considered this. This explains much. The day stretched on. Gradually, Kyreth became aware of something unfamiliar. She was not bracing herself, not anticipating. The constant internal vigilance, the preparation for disdain, had loosened, if only slightly. Nathan spoke to her the same way he always had, with the same easy irreverence and intellectual respect. He did not treat her face like a revelation. That unsettled her more than rejection would have. During the next calibration cycle, she caught her reflection in the darkened surface of a dormant screen. Instinctively, her hand rose, then stopped halfway. She saw her features as she always had, uneven markings, asymmetrical lines that violated everything her culture prized. And then, unbidden, Nathan's voice echoed in her memory. Confused. Honest. It's kind of the opposite. Her hand lowered. Later, as the station lights dimmed again by 2%, Nathan yawned and stretched. You know, he said, today went significantly better than I expected. Kyreth tilted her head. You expected failure? Constantly. It keeps me humble. She studied him, this strange human who saw elegance where she had only ever seen error. You are not deceiving me? She asked carefully. Nathan met her gaze without hesitation. Kyreth, I can barely deceive my own reflection. Something in her chest shifted, small but undeniable. The universe, it seemed, had not finished surprising her yet. Kyreth woke to the sound of the station gently informing her that she had slept exactly 17 minutes longer than optimal. She lay still, staring at the ceiling panel of her quarters, listening to the faint hum of the life support systems cycling through another carefully balanced day. Sytharan's sleep was usually precise, regulated, and mercifully free of lingering thoughts. This morning, it was not. Her mind replayed Nathan's face with infuriating clarity. Not the way he looked at her. She was accustomed to imagining that part, but the way he had not looked. No tightening of the mouth, no reflexive flinch, no polite smoothing over of discomfort. Just confusion, followed by something warm and unguarded. She covered her eyes with her forearm and exhaled sharply. This was inconvenient. By the time she reached Research Wing C, she had already adjusted the lighting twice, and considered putting the veil back on at least 4 times. Each time she stopped herself, as if her hand no longer quite remembered the motion. Instead, she walked in uncovered, ears angled neutrally, posture straight enough to suggest confidence, even if it did not fully exist. Nathan was already there, arguing with the station AI. "I don't care if the probability is low," he said. "It happened twice. That's a pattern." "The sample size is insufficient," the AI replied calmly. "So is my patience." Kyreth paused in the doorway. "Good morning," she said. Nathan turned, immediately abandoning the argument. "Oh, hi. Morning." He smiled, then visibly forced himself not to overthink it. "The AI thinks our anomaly is a fluke." Kyreth moved to her console. "The AI is statistically arrogant. Finally, someone who understands me." They settled into work with a rhythm that felt different, familiar, but altered, like a melody transposed into a new key. Nathan spoke less, watched more. Kyreth spoke more, corrected him with sharper humor, her voice occasionally lifting with amusement before she could restrain it. At one point, she caught him staring again. This time she raised an eyebrow. "Is there an error?" she asked. He blinked. "No, just recalibrating." "You recalibrate frequently." "Your fault. You added variables." Her ear twitched, betraying a smile she did not fully allow. The anomaly they were studying deepened as the day progressed. Neural response curves between humans and Sytharans began to align in unexpected ways, spiking simultaneously during moments of shared attention. It was scientifically fascinating and deeply annoying. "This shouldn't be happening," Nathan muttered. "Our species evolved under completely different environmental pressures." "Emotional cognition is not entirely bound to evolution," Kyreth replied. "Some responses are learned." "Sure, but this is like finding out two different musical instruments tune themselves to the same frequency out of spite." She considered that. "Music is a shared mathematical language." "So is math," Nathan said. "And yet accountants exist." She laughed, fully, openly, before she could stop herself. The sound surprised them both. Kyreth froze, one hand hovering above her console, ears lifting instinctively before flattening again. The laugh echoed faintly in the lab, unfamiliar and dangerously exposed. Nathan grinned. "There it is." "There is what?" she asked warily. "That laugh. It sounds like you don't apologize before it happens." She looked away. "It was unintentional." "Best kind," he said. Later, during a scheduled calibration involving mild sensory disruption, the station briefly misfired and flooded the lab with a scent best described as overconfident citrus. Nathan gagged. "Why does it smell like optimism?" he demanded. Kyreth covered her mouth, eyes watering. "This is a human preference, is it not? No one prefers this. Someone designed this." She watched him fan the air, utterly undignified, and something loosened further inside her. This human was not performing. He was not carefully moderating his reactions to avoid offense. He was simply himself, chaotic and earnest, and unbothered by the idea that someone might be watching. Someone was watching. She caught her reflection again, this time in the polished surface of a storage unit. Her markings curved unevenly along her cheek, one side more pronounced than the other. She waited for the familiar surge of self-correction. It did not come. Instead, she remembered how Nathan's gaze lingered, not on the asymmetry itself, but on her expressions as a whole, as if the face she had learned to compartmentalize was, to him, a complete and coherent thing. That night, as they logged the day's data, Nathan leaned back and stretched. "You know," he said, "if this trend holds, we're going to have to explain to the council why emotional synchronization isn't a threat." Kyreth tilted her head. "It is not." "I know that, but explaining that to politicians is like explaining gravity to a cat." She smiled, small and genuine. "You continue to use strange metaphors." "Occupational hazard." She hesitated, then spoke. "Nathan." "Yeah? Yesterday, when you spoke of asymmetry." She paused, choosing her words with care. "You did not sound as though you were trying to be kind." He turned to face her fully. "I wasn't." That answer landed heavily but not painfully. Kyreth studied him, this human who had somehow stepped outside her expectations without effort. "Then perhaps she said slowly. Our cultures are less aligned than our data suggests? Probably, Nathan agreed. But I'm starting to think that's not a flaw. The station lights dimmed again, on schedule, indifferent as ever. Kyreth did not reach for the veil. By the fourth cycle since Kyreth had removed the veil, the station had begun to notice. Not consciously, of course, stations did not gossip, but systems logged anomalies, cameras adjusted exposure automatically, and at least one junior technician walked into Research Wing C, froze mid-step, and walked straight back out without collecting the equipment he had come for. Kyreth noticed that too. She pretended not to. Nathan noticed everything else. You know, he said, squinting at a status panel, either our environmental sensors are malfunctioning or the station is attempting to slowly roast us. The temperature is within acceptable parameters, Kyreth replied. You are merely inefficient at thermoregulation. That's what my doctor says, Nathan muttered, loosening his collar. I swear, one more degree and I start hallucinating. That would explain many human decisions. He grinned. You're getting sharper. I am always sharp. Yes, but now you're aiming it. They were running a new series of simulations, this time involving projected social stressors instead of physical ones. Holographic environments flickered around them. Diplomatic chambers, crowded transit hubs, artificial night markets designed by a committee that had clearly never visited a real one. Kyreth watched the projections with careful focus. She no longer angled herself away from Nathan, though she still caught herself doing it when others passed by the lab's transparent wall. Each time she corrected the movement too late to pretend it had never happened. Nathan did not comment. Instead, he tripped over a power cable and cursed loudly enough for the station AI to issue a polite reminder about language protocols. Sorry, he said to no one in particular. My foot has declared independence. Kyreth covered her mouth with her hand, shoulders shaking. Nathan looked up. Was that? Yes, she said, still laughing. That was laughter. Great, I'm hilarious. Finally. Her laughter faded, leaving behind an unfamiliar warmth that lingered in her chest longer than expected. She straightened, suddenly aware of the open space of her face again, the absence of fabric that had once felt like armor. I have been thinking, she said. Nathan immediately grew suspicious. That usually means something important. Or disastrous. Those aren't mutually exclusive. She ignored that. You said human aesthetic preference does not prioritize symmetry. Correct. We like patterns that look like they might have stories. Her brow furrowed. Stories? Scars, freckles, uneven smiles, things that suggest a face has been lived in? Kyreth absorbed this in silence. Sytharan standards prized balance, mathematical harmony, faces that aligned with ancient proportions derived from early aristocratic lineages. Her markings, uneven, organic, impossible to map cleanly, had always marked her as careless, or worse. On Sythara, she said quietly, faces like mine are corrected. Nathan stiffened. Corrected how? She waved a hand. Surgical symmetry treatments, cultural realignment. Some choose exile instead. And you chose a research station orbiting a star with a name that translates to indifference. Yes, bold aesthetic choice, he said softly. She almost smiled. The simulation shifted abruptly, plunging them into a crowded holographic chamber designed to test response under social scrutiny. Artificial observers turned toward Kyreth, their gazes algorithmically calibrated to mirror disapproval. Her shoulders tensed instantly. Nathan noticed. Hey, he said, keeping his voice light. Remember, they're fake. My nervous system does not distinguish effectively. Same. Last week I apologized to a chair. That drew her back, if only slightly. She focused on the data stream instead of the watching eyes, grounding herself in numbers and projections. Then one of the holographic figures spoke. Your appearance is unconventional, it said. Kyreth's breath caught. Nathan swore. Okay, that line was unnecessary. It is part of the stress model, Kyreth said, voice steady but tight. Nathan stepped closer, without thinking, not touching, just there, a presence. Well, he said to the hologram, you should see our politicians. The figure blinked, recalculating. Kyreth snorted before she could stop herself. The tension fractured, breaking into something almost manageable. The simulation faltered, then shut down entirely. The lab lights returned to normal. Kyreth exhaled slowly. You interfere with controlled environments. Constantly, it's my brand. She looked at him then, really looked, and felt the familiar reflex rise. Prepare for disgust, for dismissal. Instead, there was only his face, open and earnest, eyes still tracking her reactions with professional curiosity and something else she did not yet have language for. You are not behaving as expected, she said. Neither are you, he replied. You're laughing more. She hesitated. That is unexpected. Well, he said, shrugging. Turns out when someone isn't bracing for impact, they have more energy for humor. The words lingered between them. Later, during a routine break, Kyreth stood alone near the observation window. The star outside burned steadily, uncaring and constant. She lifted a hand toward her face, stopping just short of touching the markings she had avoided all her life. Nathan approached quietly. For what it's worth, he said, you don't have to prove anything, to me or anyone. She did not turn. You say that as though it is simple. It's not, he admitted, but simple and easy are different beasts. She considered that, then nodded once. The station lights dimmed again, precisely on schedule. Kyreth remained uncovered, and this time she did not feel exposed. The fifth day without the veil began with a mistake. Nathan spilled nutrient concentrate across the console, shorted a minor interface, and triggered an alarm that sounded suspiciously like a distressed aquatic mammal. The Station A, I announced the incident with calm disapproval and suggested corrective action with the enthusiasm of a disappointed parent. Kyreth stared at the spreading liquid, then at Nathan, then back at the liquid. You have injured the console, she said. I prefer to think of it as aggressively feeding it. That console does not metabolize. Yet, Nathan replied, technology advances fast. She closed her eyes, inhaled, and then laughed. Not sharply this time, not cautiously. It slipped out of her, warm and surprised, as if her body had finally accepted that joy was not a punishable offense. Nathan froze mid-apology. Oh, he said softly, that was a good one. She covered her mouth, ears angling back in embarrassed reflex before lifting again. This is becoming frequent. I've been told exposure therapy works. For trauma, she said dryly. Humor counts, he said. Mostly. They cleaned the mess together, shoulders brushing once, accidentally, harmlessly, and Kyreth felt the contact ripple through her awareness far more strongly than it should have. Sytharan culture discouraged unnecessary touch. Human culture, she was learning, was aggressively tactile and wildly inconsistent about it. She did not pull away. As the day unfolded, their project shifted from individual analysis to shared cognition modeling. The station generated a paired neural simulation, linking their response feeds into a single adaptive matrix. It was experimental, controversial, and required a level of trust that made the ethics board nervous. Nathan signed the waiver without reading it. Kyreth read it twice. You understand, she said carefully, that this will expose subconscious responses. Yep, including emotional associations. And latent perception biases. Those were exposed years ago. She watched him for a long moment. You are remarkably unafraid. Not unafraid, he corrected. Just tired of pretending curiosity is dangerous. The simulation engaged. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the world tilted. The lab dissolved into a shared construct, an abstract space of shifting light and memory fragments, filtered through the station's attempt to reconcile two very different neural architectures. Kyreth felt her senses stretch, overlap, blur at the edges. She felt him. Not physically, cognitively, a presence like background radiation, constant, warm, mildly chaotic. She sensed his attention drift, circle, return, felt his thoughts brush against hers, careful, respectful, never forcing entry. Nathan, for his part, felt like he had stepped into a library where all the books were written in a language he almost understood. Kyreth's mind was precise, layered, elegant in its construction. He felt her hesitation like a held breath, her curiosity like a slow unfolding. "Okay," he said aloud, though sound was more suggestion than vibration here. "This is a lot." "You are loud," Kyreth replied, though her tone carried amusement rather than criticism. "Sorry, humans think loudly." "I have noticed." The simulation introduced stress markers, projected social scrutiny, cultural judgment, remembered moments of exclusion. Kyreth's responses spiked instantly. Nathan felt the echo of it, sharp and unexpected, like touching ice. He reacted without thinking. The construct shifted. Suddenly the judgment softened, reframed. Where Kyreth expected rejection, there was confusion, curiosity, interest. Nathan's perception overlaid hers, not replacing it, just existing alongside it. Kyreth staggered. "This is incorrect," she said, steadying herself. "The data is wrong." Nathan frowned. "It's not data, it's perspective." "I do not—" She stopped, breath catching. "I do not experience myself this way." "I know," he said quietly. "That's why it feels weird." The simulation ended abruptly, the station AI citing emergent emotional convergence beyond test parameters and shutting everything down with bureaucratic haste. They stood in the lab again, breathing hard. Kyreth pressed a hand to her chest. "That was invasive." "Yeah," Nathan agreed, "but also kind of incredible." She looked at him, searching for mockery, for discomfort. Found neither. "What you perceived," she said slowly, "was not accurate. It was accurate to me. That does not make it true. It makes it mine," he said, "and I'm allowed that." The silence stretched, not heavy, but full. Later, during a scheduled rest cycle, they sat by the observation window again. The star burned steadily, indifferent as always. Kyreth traced the curve of her own marking, absently with one finger, something she had never done in front of another being. "On Sythara," she said, "I was taught that beauty is harmony." "And you decided you were noise," Nathan said. "Yes." "Well," he replied, leaning back, "some of the best music is dissonant." She considered that, then shook her head. "Your metaphors are excessive." "Occupational hazard." She smiled at him, openly, without apology, and for the first time the reflection in the glass did not feel like an enemy. The station lights dimmed. Neither of them noticed right away, and when they did, neither moved. The notification arrived precisely 12 minutes before they were ready for it. Kyreth saw it first, her console pulsing with diplomatic priority markers that never meant anything pleasant. Her ears stiffened, angling back before she consciously corrected them. The reflex was old, ingrained, and deeply irritating. Nathan noticed anyway. "That face," he said, "that's either incoming disaster or someone scheduled a meeting that could have been an email." "It is worse," Kyreth replied. "Sytharan delegation, Cultural Oversight Committee." Nathan groaned. "Oh, the face police. They prefer Aesthetic Integrity Council." "Of course they do." The station AI chimed in, unhelpfully cheerful. "Delegation arrival estimated in 46 hours. Environmental preferences uploaded. Please note, lighting levels must be adjusted to Sytharan standards." Kyreth's hand froze above the controls. Nathan frowned. "Hey, you don't have to—" "I know," she said quickly, too quickly. "I will comply." The words tasted familiar, bitter, safe. For the first time in days, she reached for the veil. The motion stopped halfway. Nathan watched, heart doing something unscientific. He said nothing. He had learned slowly that filling silence was not always kindness. Kyreth lowered her hand. "I will decide later," she said. The 46 hours passed faster than expected. The station transformed itself with bureaucratic efficiency. Lighting softened into mathematically perfect gradients. Surfaces polished to reflective symmetry. Ambient sound dampened until even Nathan felt underdressed emotionally. "Feels like a very judgmental spa," he muttered. Kyreth almost smiled. Almost. When the delegation arrived, they did so with elegance and quiet authority. 3 Sytharans, their faces flawless by cultural standard, markings mirrored perfectly, ears adorned with ceremonial bands that denoted rank and lineage. They looked at Kyreth, And then, very deliberately, they did not. Nathan felt the snub like a physical thing. His jaw tightened. Researcher Kyreth, the lead delegate said eventually, tone polite and empty. You have adapted. Kyreth inclined her head. I have continued my work. Uncovered, another noted, eyes flicking briefly toward her face before sliding away again. Nathan stepped forward before Kyreth could respond. Hi, Nathan, human, co-lead on the project you're here to audit. They looked at him now. Mild curiosity, mild confusion. You are comfortable, the lead delegate said slowly, with this arrangement? Nathan smiled, brightly, dangerously. I'm thrilled. Best collaboration I've had in years. Frankly, you're interrupting our momentum. Kyreth stared at him. The delegate paused, recalibrating. Your aesthetic tolerance is broad. Selective, Nathan corrected. I have standards. They just don't include symmetry quotas. Kyreth coughed. It might have been laughter. The meeting itself was a master class in restrained tension. Data was presented, results discussed, implications debated. Kyreth answered questions with precision, her confidence steady but carefully contained. Nathan, meanwhile, employed what he privately thought of as strategic obnoxiousness, interrupting at inconvenient moments, over-explaining irrelevant human context, and generally making it impossible for the delegates to isolate Kyreth as an anomaly without engaging him as well. At one point, the lead delegate said, Your neural convergence results suggest improper emotional alignment. Nathan leaned back. Or successful interspecies empathy. That is not a scientific metric. Neither is aesthetic discomfort, he shot back. Yet here we are. Kyreth felt something swell in her chest. Gratitude, yes, but also something sharper. A longing she hadn't dared to name. After the meeting, she retreated to the observation deck, veil finally in place, hands trembling despite her efforts to still them. The star outside burned on, indifferent witness to everything. Nathan found her there. You didn't have to do that, she said without turning. Didn't I? He replied. I'm pretty sure I did. She exhaled slowly. They will report this. Let them. Worst case, I get reassigned. I hear the Traskians have excellent snacks. She laughed weakly. You are not taking this seriously. I am, he said softly. I just refuse to take them seriously. She turned to face him, veil still between them. I wish, she said, voice low, that I could see myself the way you do. Just once, without effort. Nathan hesitated, then spoke carefully. I can't give you my eyes, but I can give you time. Her ears angled forward slightly. Hope, fragile and dangerous. Later that night, the delegation requested a private review of Kyreth's presentation materials. She stood alone in the conference chamber, lights too perfect, reflections unforgiving. She reached for the veil again. This time she removed it. When the delegates entered, they faltered, just for a fraction of a second. Kyreth met their gaze calmly. I will not be corrected, she said. I will not be hidden, and I will not apologize. Silence. Nathan, watching through the observation feed, let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. The delegation left without comment. The station lights dimmed on schedule. Kyreth did not put the veil back on, and somewhere between the stars and the silence, she began, slowly, imperfectly, to believe that maybe, just maybe, the face she had been taught to hide was not a mistake after all. The station returned to its habits slowly, like a creature testing whether danger had truly passed. Lighting schedules normalized. Delegation protocols cleared. The AI stopped inserting polite warnings into every conversation as if diplomacy were contagious. Research Wing C settled back into its familiar hum, punctuated by the occasional dropped object, misfired sensor, or Nathan muttering apologies to inanimate equipment. Kyreth noticed all of it. She noticed, too, that she no longer flinched when footsteps echoed outside the lab, that she did not instinctively angle her face away from reflective surfaces, that the veil remained folded neatly in her quarters, untouched, like an artifact from a previous life she had not entirely abandoned, but no longer inhabited. Nathan noticed different things. He noticed that Kyreth corrected him less gently now, with sharper humor and less hesitation. that she laughed before deciding whether she should, that when she concentrated, she leaned closer to the work table instead of retreating into herself. Growth, he had learned, often looked like comfort rather than courage. Their final report took weeks to complete. The neural convergence data had rewritten several assumptions about interspecies cognition, enough to keep review boards arguing for years. Kyreth wrote most of it. Nathan edited with commentary that ranged from insightful to deeply unnecessary. "This paragraph needs clarity," Kyreth said at one point. "It's perfectly clear. You included a metaphor involving cats and gravity." "Foundational science," he replied. She rolled her eyes. "Humans are exhausting." "And yet," he said, smiling, "you keep us around." One evening, as the station drifted through the star's shadow, Kyreth stood at the observation window alone. She studied her reflection in the glass, not searching for flaws, not correcting angles, just looking. Her markings were still uneven. Her face still violated every rule she had been taught to respect. She smiled at it anyway. Nathan joined her quietly. "You know," he said, "the council sent a follow-up." Her ears angled slightly. "I assumed they would. They've reclassified your work as culturally adaptive excellence." She blinked. "That sound reluctant." "It's bureaucratic for, we were wrong but won't admit it loudly." She considered that, then laughed. "I will accept that." They stood in companionable silence, watching the star re-emerge, brilliant and uncaring. Kyreth felt something settle inside her. Not triumph, not defiance, but acceptance. She did not need her culture's permission to exist as she was. "I used to think," she said slowly, "that beauty was something granted, earned through conformity." Nathan nodded. "Humans tried that. Didn't go great." "I see that now," she continued. "Beauty is perspective, context, and occasionally," and he added, "a very stubborn researcher who refuses to see what he's supposed to." She glanced at him. "You are referring to yourself." "Constantly." Their partnership did not change overnight into something dramatic or performative. There were no declarations, no sudden redefinitions. Instead, there was continuity, shared work, shared meals, shared jokes that made no sense to anyone else. One morning, Kyreth arrived at the lab to find Nathan staring at a message feed. "Good news?" she asked. "Depend," he said. "They're offering you a lead position on Sytharan, Cultural Reform Initiative." She stiffened. Old fears stirred, then faded. "And you?" "They offered me a consultancy. Remote. I declined." She turned to him. "Why?" He shrugged. "I like my variables local." She studied him, then nodded once. "So do I." When the time came to transmit the final report, they did it together. 2 signatures, equal credit. The station AI confirmed receipt and congratulated them in a tone that suggested it did not entirely understand why this mattered so much. Afterward, Nathan leaned back and exhaled. "Well, we may have accidentally changed how 2 species understand each other." Kyreth smiled. "You say that as though it was unintended. Most important things are." Later, as the lights dimmed, still 2%, always 2%, Kyreth reached for the veil one last time. She held it, considering the fabric, the years it represented. Then she folded it carefully and placed it in storage. Not discarded, just complete. Nathan watched, saying nothing. They returned to the observation window, standing side by side. The star burned on, indifferent witness to small, significant revolutions. Kyreth met her reflection one last time in the glass. She did not see ugliness. She did not see beauty as her people defined it. She saw herself, and for the first time, that was enough.